Okay, so in chapter 9, we talked a little bit about cost in the sense of implicit cost, explicit cost, and I mentioned that there's other ways of thinking about cost. What we want to do in chapter 10 is explore some of that and explore some other things too. So, what I'm going to do though is start out, before we head down that road, we have to have a little bit of a discussion about time epic, okay? Because in economics, time is dealt with slightly differently than perhaps in other fields or disciplines, okay? So let's talk about the difference between the short run and the long run. This becomes, pretty important, okay? So what you'll notice is that in economics, economists, I will never use a unit when talking about short run or long run. So in other words, I'll never discuss the short run in terms of days or weeks or months or something like that, and won't discuss the long run in terms of years or decades or centuries, because that's not the way economists deal with these, okay? The way that economists deal with these is the short run is a moment in time. So you think of the short run as a snapshot versus the long run, which is a trend over time. Okay, so if that doesn't make any sense, think about this. Think about a movie, right? A movie is this big long, film, and it's made up of thousands and thousands of individual little pictures, and when sort of run together, it makes this movie, right? And that's sort of the long run. It's sort of a long run trend. But you can isolate on each frame as sort of a snapshot in time, and that's what the short run is. Okay, so if that doesn't make perfect sense right now, just hang in there and perhaps it will. One of the biggest differences that we make is in the short run, in the long run. I mean, if you think about firms and you think about production, right? We already defined production as what firms do to input to make outputs. Okay, so in the long run, so all production, you have the four factors of production, right? Land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. And just to make things easy, let's get rid of two of them. Okay, so let's just get rid of land and entrepreneurship. Okay, so all we're going to do is we're going to simplify it and reduce it down and say all firms have are labor and capital as inputs, and then they're, through production, able to produce some sort of output. Okay, well, in the long run, both labor and capital are variable. They can be varied. Okay? Versus in the short run, labor is variable, but capital is fixed. Okay, now let's talk about this because it may be confusing. If you have no idea what I just wrote on the board, here's a pretty good example that talks about or kind of illuminates it. Okay, so let's say you've always wanted to own your own pizzeria. Okay, so you've planned for the event, you've done all this research, and boy, you're going to own your own pizzeria. And the fact is that after a time period of planning and so forth, you're able to purchase a place, and maybe you start out with one pizza oven, right? And 3 employees, okay? And over time, the business grows, so you add another pizza oven, you add more employees, and over time, you continue to grow, and so you add another pizza oven and more employees, and your business is booming. Okay, well, that's a really good example of the long run, right? Because that time epic occurred over, a period of time, and both inputs were variable, right? You started out with one pizza oven and you were able to buy another, then another. You started out with a handful of employees, etc. So in the long run, both of those inputs are variable, okay? Now let's talk about the short run. Let's say one day there's a knock on your dorm room door and it's your mother. She goes, "Oh, you gotta come home. Uncle Tony is gone and you need to take over Uncle Tony's pizzeria tomorrow. All right? So think about that. You have to show up at your uncle's pizzeria tomorrow and take it over. And that is a good example of the short runs, the snapshot in time. Well, when you walk into the door first thing in the morning, can you control how many pizza ovens you have? No, you can't, right? So your capital is fixed. You have however many pizza ovens Uncle Tony had the day before. Now, can you control your labor? Well, yeah. You're going to walk in and you're going to have some number of employees, but there's nothing that prevents you from hiring or firing employees immediately, right? So again, think about that. Snapshot in time, you got to take over the business tomorrow, right now, and you have no control over how many pizza ovens you have because it's fixed, okay? So that's kind of what we're talking here. Now, let's look at a production function, okay? So, if I put those two inputs up here. So this is a production function. And just to be clear, we started last chapter, we were talking about cost, and we're going to come back to cost, but right now we're taking a little bit of a break from cost and talking about production and through this production function, okay? And of course, production function is nothing more than a schedule, okay? So here we go. So I'll put our two inputs up there. So we have our labor, and then we have our capital. Now remember, in the short run, because this is a short run, our labor is variable. So we're going to have a varied number of workers, okay? Our capital, however, is fixed. So in this case, we'll stick with pizza ovens. We've got 3 pizza ovens. So when we have 0 employees, we still have 3 pizza ovens. We have 1 employee, 3 pizza ovens. See how the 3 doesn't change? It doesn't change because it's fixed, okay? Now, if we look at output, I'm going to just give this to you, right? Because with 0 workers and 3 pizza ovens, how many pizzas are going to get made? 0, right? But here's where I'm going to tell you. So I hire my first worker, right? I got 3 pizza ovens, and that worker can make 100 pizzas, okay? That's not too bad. So a short while later, I hire 2. Now, 2 workers using those same 3 pizza ovens, turns out, can make 250 pizzas, okay? So let's talk about this for a sec. Is that good? Yeah, our output's increasing, looks pretty good. So I hire a third person, and 3 workers, using 3 pizza ovens, can produce 350 pizzas. 4 people can produce 400 pizzas. 5 can produce 420. Looks like it's doing pretty good, so I hire a 6th person, and Scooby-Doo, 6 people using 3 pizza ovens can only produce 400. So we've had a drop in our output. That's not good. So what this production function is really looking at is efficiency. This doesn't tell you how many people to hire. That's not what we're trying to do here, right? We're trying to look at, given the 2 inputs, right, what is the most effective or efficient use of those inputs. And really, something called the Law of Diminishing Returns is what tells us when we're at our most efficient, okay? Now, you would think, well, Mr. Dixon, that's easy. I can see right here when you hired 6 people, your output went down to 400, so that has to be when the law of diminishing marginal returns is becoming, is setting in, right? And no, okay? So in order to answer the question, when does this when does the diminishing returns occur? We have to look at marginal product. So we're missing a column. Now, don't freak out, right? Because we've talked about marginal. What does marginal mean? It means next increment or next unit. Product is just output. So marginal product is literally how many pizzas can the next person make? Or if we owned a landscaping business, how many lawns can the next worker mow? That's all marginal product is. And to look at marginal product or to understand or calculate marginal product, all you do is like for the first person, right? That first person can make 100 pizzas by themselves. Well, before there was 0, 100 minus 0 is what? 100. So the marginal product of that first person is 100, meaning that person by themselves can make 100 pizzas. Now think about this. When I hired 2, the total output goes to 250, right? Well, what's the marginal product of that second person? Well, if 2 can make 250, and I know that first person can make 100, then 250 minus 50 is what? 150. So the marginal product of the second worker is 150. That doesn't mean that the second worker is better or the first worker is goofing off. It just means, through some combination of capital and labor together, that second worker just happens to be slightly more productive. Okay, what's the marginal product of the third worker? Well, 350 minus 250 is 100. Fourth worker, 400 minus 350 is 50, 25. And then looky here, ruh-roh, Scooby-Doo, 400 minus 425. So the marginal product of that sixth worker is actually negative 25, which is just not good, okay? But here's the million-dollar question. When does diminishing marginal returns set in? And here's what I want you to do. After you've calculated marginal product, you just count down until the number gets smaller. So we're at 100, right? 150 is bigger. Okay, great. Well, 100 is smaller than 150, so we circle that, and we say that the law of diminishing marginal returns, or diminishing marginal returns, sets in with the 1 to 3rd worker. Okay? And there we go. And of course, if you didn't have, let's say this was missing, or let's say this was missing, all right? So to calculate those, again, pretty easy, right? I showed you how to calculate that. What's the marginal product of the second person? Well, second person, 250 minus 100, 150, no big deal. But in this case, if I told you that the marginal product of the fourth person was 50, and then ask you what the total output was for 4 workers, then all you would do is add 50 to 350, and you would know that this was 400. Okay? Make sense? All right. Take a look at that, and I'll be back.